Hello, advanced 8th grade. This is the recap video for May 6th. We had a pretty short class period today. There's a couple of kind of housekeeping things that we want to remind you about. First of all, which is not included on this list, is that form that was sent out last Friday that is to help gauge your interest in sitting the pre-assessment. And should you not get 70% on that pre-assessment, what your plans were, whether it was participating in the summer credit recovery option or retaking in the fall, that kind of thing. So again, the pre-assessment cannot harm you in any way. We do highly recommend that everyone plan to sit that pre-assessment, but if you don't want to do that, you do still have options to remain on track as well. So just kind of let us know your thoughts on that form that's already posted on Google Classroom. The second thing that we'd like you to participate in is this play participation form. Because we are getting into a text that was written literally to be performed, students tend to have a higher success rate if they can read it out loud rather than sit and read it as if it was a textbook or even just a novel. It can be kind of distracting to read a play like a novel. So we really want to encourage as many readers as possible. Ms. Decker and myself are both really interested in reading as well. Mr. Dickinson, I think, is going to join us to read as well, but there are plenty of scenes where you need more than 3 people. And I think it tends to be more interesting if you can get involved as well. So we do want to try and get as many people as reading as possible. This form is what that looks like, where if you know you do not want to read, just go ahead and click no for everything. But we want you to just tell us who you are so we know what kinds of things you are interested in. And then we want to know if you're willing to read a large part of the play, like Romeo and Juliet have, in some scenes, fairly large chunks of text to read. And if you're interested in reading them, once we assign parts to people, you can actually read ahead and get a little bit more familiar with the content if you wish. So this large part option is primarily going to be Romeo or Juliet. There are a few scenes where some characters who have smaller parts are kind of featured in a scene or two, and so they'll have longer chunks of text. But most of this is going to be the 2 title characters. If you are specifically interested in Romeo and Juliet, there is a secondary kind of follow-up question for that that we would like you to check there if you're interested in Romeo or Juliet. And quick side note, we're not basing this on gender at all. If we only have guys who click this section or girls who click this section, we don't really care. We're going to assign you like, I might read Romeo for a scene, that kind of thing. In Shakespeare's day, it was illegal for women to act, so everyone would have been men or male anyway. So we're not really assigning roles based on the gender of the character. We're assigning roles based on interest. The next thing that we want you to consider is interesting a larger part, but one that is maybe not a main character. There are a few side characters like Friar Lawrence or the nurse or Mercutio who have some longer chunks of text, but they're not going to be necessarily consistent in those large chunks of text, and they definitely won't be in every scene. Some of that kind of blends over into this next question. I'm interested in reading a smaller part, one featured in a few scenes, but kind of primarily they're not. Or if you're like, I'm interested in reading, but I'm kind of nervous about the whole language barrier thing, I maybe only want one of the side characters that doesn't really say a ton over the course of the show. Then this very bottom question is just any other comments that you'd like us to consider. If there's a specific role, like if you're really familiar with the play and you're like, I really want to read for Benvolio, or I really want Tybalt. If there's a specific person that you're interested in, go ahead and jot that there. Or if you're like, I really don't care what I read, I just want to read, that kind of thing, go ahead and just jot that comment in that final box and click submit. Other kind of housekeeping things, there will be a comprehension check assigned in Google Classroom through the My Perspectives textbook work. These are highly encouraged. They do mimic the pre-assessment in question format, not necessarily in style. A lot of your pre-assessment is multiple choice, whereas your comprehension checks for this are a little bit more open-ended, kind of short answer notebook stuff. Those comprehension checks can be completed all within the My Perspectives portal, which will be linked to Google Classroom as we assign each act to you. Or you can do them in your notebook, that kind of thing. If you just want to type them up in a Google Doc and share it, that's okay as well. Those aren't, again, not really assigned work. It's suggested that you do them because it will kind of help you kind of check in over the course of the play, how well you're getting it. If there's something in particular that you do not understand, definitely bring those up on some Friday Zoom help sessions. But they're not even work that Ms. Decker and I are planning on checking in on every week. It's really just a study tool for your use. And then as we continue, we're also going to be bringing back some of those language standards that we began before we closed out of like daily school, but things that are still going to be on your pre-assessment that we just want to make sure that you're getting as much practice with as possible. So we're going to be bringing up a lot of clause work, specifically identifying dependent versus independent clauses, and then we're also going to be, in the weeks coming, we're going to be talking about some parallel structure. We might throw in some punctuation stuff, but primarily we're going to be focusing on clauses and the structure of writing. The last thing that we're going to talk about today is the prologue from Romeo and Juliet. It's the first thing we're going to be doing with the text, and then some extra resources that you have with access, that sort of thing. And then we're going to start reading the rest of the scene work of Act 1 starting next Monday. So if you are interested in reading, please, please, please go back and fill out this play participation form. All right, Ms. Decker covered the clause work from class today, and this is really just an overview of what we had started before we went on break. So this is stuff that you had some practice with on No Red Ink already. Some of this work was quizzed over already, so this is all not brand new information. We had just kind of started the Thamos and Fanboys and Swabby stuff in my class before we closed down, so we might need to access a little bit more of the No Red Ink notes features for those in particular. But most of this is all review. Just remember, like, independent clauses can stand on their own as a complete sentence. They're sometimes called main clauses, but in a lot of education especially, we refer to them as independent clauses. Versus dependent clauses are parts of sentences that cannot stand on their own. And that's really what those Famos, Fanboys, and Swabby words are really for. They're those marker words, or they connect dependent clauses to independent clauses, or sometimes they attach two independent clauses together to form one complex sentence. And then Ms. Decker included 2 examples for you. She also linked a separate resource that's different than No Red Ink. The Purdue OWL is kind of the go-to source for a lot of English-based writing, or if you're doing research, whether you're in a literature class or not, if you're looking at different citation styles, Purdue OWL is really the place to go, other than like the MLA style handbook. It's probably the most reputable writing guide source out there. So they have some other, a little bit more in-depth thinking and notes that No Red Ink does not include, because people of all writing, especially a lot of college students, use Purdue OWL as well. So it goes just a little step past what No Red Ink shows. So it is suggested that you check out that link if you're looking for some more information as well. After Ms. Decker went over the clause work today, we moved into the prologue. So this is the things that I talked about in today's lesson. And the prologue is weird. It is considered part of Act 1, but it takes place before the play officially starts. So it's this weird kind of in limbo moment of the play. We chose to look at the prologue today because it gives you a taste of the language again from the play. It gets you thinking about the storyline of the play, but it reviews the structure of the sonnets that we talked about on Monday of this week. The prologue is an example of a perfect Elizabethan or Shakespearean sonnet. So we can use those same sonnet reading tricks that we talked about on Monday. So if we just look at the first 4 lines, 2 households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona where we lay our scene, from ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. So the first 4 lines we know in a Shakespearean sonnet have one idea encaptured within those 4 lines, right? If the rhyme scheme matches, they're going to be connected ideas. And so those first 4 lines are just this character of chorus. So it's not even a true character of the play. They're really just there in the opening. Some productions put them in at the end, where another character speaks. But usually the chorus is only seen in this prologue moment, and they're there to kind of break that 4th wall in between the play and the audience. And they're just there to kind of fill in some gaps. So these first 4 lines talk about the setting. It's the exposition of the play. We know that this play is going to take place with 2 different households. Now, that's not talking about physical house structures. We're talking about the family members who make up that house. So there's going to be like a main family that we follow. So the mom and dad of the Capulet family plus their daughter, and then the mom and dad of the Montague family plus their son. But it's also going to talk about cousins and second cousins and aunts and like distant relations who we're not quite sure how they're related, but they are. But they're mainly going to be these 2 families of Capulet and Montague. So we know to expect 2 different families through the entire play. Both alike in dignity is like they are matched on social status. It's not like a Cinderella story where one is really rich and successful and one is kind of fighting to move up in the world. They are essentially exactly the same. They make the same amount of money. They have the same reputations, that kind of thing. And Fair Verona is a city in northern Italy. Romeo and Juliet is an old Italian tale. People who would be going to see Romeo and Juliet would have already known, likely, the main storyline. So this isn't a spoiler alert. We're just kind of establishing this is where we've chosen to set it. And this is the story you're going to hear. From ancient grudge, break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean, is talking about how this is a grudge that has lasted for so long in history that likely the family members who are alive during the time of the play don't even remember what the grudge is about. They just know that the Capulets have always hated the Montagues for as long as they can remember, and the Montagues have always hated the Capulets for as long as they can remember, and they're going to keep fighting and keep this hatred going because that's what's always been done, and no one can say anything to make it otherwise. The civil blood is an example of one of those kind of play on words that Shakespeare really likes to use. So civil blood, if you think about like the American Civil War, were brethren of the same country fighting each other. Sometimes they were literally brothers on both sides of like Union and Confederacy who would fight. Sometimes it's distant relations. Sometimes it's just like, hey, you're a fellow American, but we don't believe the same thing, so we're going to fight. So it could be civil, meaning it's from the same country that way, but it's also a play on words because both of these households or both families are families of like high wealth and general nobility. So these are people who really should know better, people who should know to set a better example from the other citizens of Verona, and they refuse to put this fight aside. So these fights will interrupt the entire cityscape of Verona sometimes, and it's this major event. You're going to see a prince become involved because he can't get these guys in line. So this civil blood makes civil hands unclean kind of has that double meaning. So we know that these first 4 lines are all just setting. Then the next 4, we know that in a Shakespearean sonnet, the next 4 lines are going to either add a little bit of complexity or they're going to shift that idea just a little bit. And in this case, we're going to talk about some of the specific characters in the play. Oops, I highlighted the wrong line. From fourth all the way through parent strife is the next set of 4. From forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, whose misadventured piteous overthrows do, with their death, bury their parent strife. Now, this is breaking out from, yes, this is a feud happening, into more of the who are the specific characters we're going to talk about. We know that from forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers. So we're going to be talking about 2 kids. So this play is not focusing mostly on the parents, it's focusing more on the children. And those are going to be our 2 main characters. And we know they're not going to have a happy ending. Shakespeare coined the term star-crossed lovers, but now we recognize that as an archetype. So any story or movie that you watch that has a pair of lovers who, for some reason, cannot be together happily are called, because of this play, star-crossed lovers. And usually that means one or both of them are going to die at the end of the story. Not always, sometimes they're just separated, but usually there's a tragic fall where they're going to end up dead, as is the case with Romeo and Juliet. And we know that they're not going to be killed in an accident in some sort of way. They are going to actually commit suicide, which is one of the main criticisms of this play, because they think that there's no possible way for them to be together. There's a little bit of miscommunication, which unfortunately leaves them both dead by their own hand. And that is going to be the catalyst that, with their death, bury their parents' strife. So because both of these children die, there's loss on both sides. These parents finally realize that this grudge has really gone on too long, and now they can make peace at the end because this loss is so devastating. They realize that there are really more important things to do than argue. Which leads us to our last section of 4, where again we have that Shakespearean turn. And in this case, we're moving away from the content of the play and putting our focus more on the audience watching this play. The fearful passage of their death-marked love and the continuance of their parents' rage, which but their children's end naught could remove, is now the 2 hours traffic of our stage. So this chorus member is saying if these kids had not died, their parents would never have patched things up and put their love aside. So this love that exists, it's one of the great love stories of history, but it is marked with death, and we know that this can never have a happy ending. Does kind of have a small silver lining where it does end the feud. But we're going to say this entire story, this complex story of love and death and hatred and forgiveness, is only going to take 2 hours, which in Shakespearean England was a pretty common, well, kind of shorter runtime of a Shakespearean play. So it's just kind of saying, like, how long could you expect to be at the theater? If you come to the theater at noon or at 2 o'clock, you're going to be there until 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock, depending on what showtime is starting. And then the last couplet is, again, more of an audience focus. And it's saying that there's a relationship between the players and the audience. And if they didn't like, or if they missed something in this prologue, to forgive them, because they're going to fill in those gaps with the actual content of the play that starts immediately after this prologue or this chorus member leaves the stage. The which, if you with patient ears attend, so please be patient with us, what here shall miss, so what here in the prologue you miss, our toil shall strive to mend. So just stick around. If there's something that doesn't quite make sense in this prologue, watch the rest of the play. You're going to like it. Let's get the show on the road kind of stuff. All right. And then the last thing that we're going to cover from the work today was accessing text and possible film versions. Everything that you're going to see on Google Classroom has been linked in Pearson Realize, that we're going to be pushing out chunks of text by act. So you'll see already today, you should have a link from Pearson that has the prologue. It's actually all of Act 1. We just looked at the prologue today. You can read ahead if you want. We are going to be reading the entire text out loud in Zoom meetings. So if you don't want to read ahead, you don't have to. But you don't have to worry about how are you going to get access to this book because we're going to be sending it to you. If you want some other resources that contain the text, My Shakespeare is a free website with lots of interactive content. There are chunks where actors will just address the camera with some of the more iconic lines and break them down for you. There's character interviews. There's some vocab work on My Shakespeare. There's lots of really cool stuff there. My Folger Shakespeare Library is nationally known for their scholarly work around Shakespeare. You could always read the text online, but now because of COVID closures, you can download files. If you don't want to be on the internet all the time, you can download the file and save it and access it offline. Also, due to COVID, the audio stuff that you used to have to pay for or subscribe to is also now free until I think July 1st is where they're cutting that off. The last link that I have posted here is called the MIT Shakespeare Project, which is really a no-nonsense type website. If you're not struggling with vocab or anything like that and you just want the text itself, the MIT Shakespeare Project allows you to select either specific scene numbers and load just that scene on a web page. Or you could click, there's a link that says full text, knows the entire play, where you don't have to refresh the page to get a new scene. The whole thing just loads in the web page. It doesn't really look very snazzy. Again, it's just really straightforward HTML typing of the text of the play. But if that's all you need, that's a resource for you. If we were teaching this in a normal classroom setting, we would read a chunk and then watch a chunk. Unfortunately, we cannot show clips due to some copyright notices like that. There's no way for us to upload content. There is a lot that exists on YouTube, a little more on that later. But there are 3 kind of notably filmed versions that we do want to just bring aware exist. These are not required to watch. I tried to do some digging earlier today, and I think at this point, all of them you have to pay to watch. There's none available on Netflix or anything to watch for free if you have that subscription service. They are all available on Amazon, which is where I found them, but they're all, you have to rent or buy them. The first one that I've listed is the Franco Zeffirelli version. This is the version that Ms. Decker and I would have watched when we were in high school. It's kind of the pinnacle filmed version of Romeo and Juliet that a lot of people cite. It's from 1960s. It also has the friendliest movie rating out of the 3. It's rated PG. There's really not a ton of kind of bad content that you see in that version. This is the one that we would be able to watch all the way through without having to skip anything in school. The second version is my personal favorite and Ms. Decker's personal favorite. It's the Baz Luhrmann Romeo and Juliet version. A really young Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes are the stars of this version. And they take the entire traditional text of Romeo and Juliet and they modernize the setting. So the language doesn't change at all, just how you perceive the content changes. It does have a slightly more mature rating due to some things that the characters do on screen. So it's rated PG-13 rather than PG. And again, this is a rent or buy option only. The last filmed version that's kind of more notable or widespread is the Carlo Carlet version. This was the recent one from 2013. Again, it's PG-13. The thing that I want to point out with this one is that it's the basic storyline. Some of the scenes they have moved out of order, and I don't understand why they did that. So if you're going to watch this version, this has Haley Steinfeld as Juliet. If you're going to watch this version, remember that some of the action will happen out of sequence, which could affect some of those comprehension checks that we're going to be sending out. So just be really careful when you compare this version to the text. And then the language is not Shakespearean language. So if you're struggling with basic like concepts, this one might be a good one to just jump in and do some quick like scene specific work, but it will not help you with the Shakespearean language at all because most of it is told in modern English with just a few kind of random lines in the Shakespearean English version. For whatever reason, this is kind of a nitpicky thing. For whatever reason, they also switched some of the basic symbolism of the text. In almost every production you see, the Capulets wear some form of red or pink or orange, and the Montagues wear blues and purples. In the Carlo Carli version, they flip those for who knows what reason, but Montagues tend to wear red in that movie and Capulets wear blue, and it's one thing that personally bothers me because it makes no sense. But it's probably a pretty small detail if you're not used to Romeo and Juliet. The last film version that I want to bring up for it's an entire play, film start to finish, is the Globe Theatre's version. This is their 2009 English version. There's one that was filmed a little later that they performed in Portuguese, I think. Unfortunately, the free window for this ended about a month ago. It was available to watch for free. Now you have to rent or buy it through the Globe Player. But it's kind of cool because it's performed at the Globe Theatre, which is the same theater. I mean, it's a rebuilt version of the same theater that it would have been performed on at some point in Shakespeare's time. But it's unfortunately not available to watch without having to pay for it, which kind of sucks. Then the last kind of video access link is YouTube. I don't have a specific link pulled here because there are tons of clips. There are tons of filmed productions of Romeo and Juliet on YouTube. You just kind of want to know it is YouTube. It is free to upload. You're going to get a pretty staggering mix of quality of filming and sound issues, but there are lots of school productions, especially high school and colleges, who have uploaded the entire play start to finish on their website, so you can kind of click around. If you find one that you think is particularly well done or that you really enjoy, go ahead and email one of your teachers that link, because we like to know what kinds of things students really appreciate and what really kind of rings true for them. And then those are links that we can save for a free filming version for future student use. All right, just like every other video, if you have any questions or concerns with the work that we are asking you to do, never hesitate to reach out via email to one of your teachers. We are also offering for advanced students only a Friday Zoom session. I want to say that that's starting at 11:30 and running until 12 to 12:15 if we have a lot of people on asking questions. It is not a requirement. It does not go towards your weekly participation count or that sort of thing. It's just if you have a question, Ms. Decker or myself or both of us will be online at that time to answer that question. You can just pop on, ask the question, receive your answer, and then leave. It's really just a structured for like an office hour type help session rather than a full planned out lesson. Okay, so it won't be something that you log in and you just sit for a half hour and get new content. Nothing new will be said on Friday. It'll just be review sessions for you. All right, so if you have questions, I am looking forward to seeing you there. Enjoy the rest of your week if you don't have questions, and we'll see you at 9 a.m. on Monday.